Activity 1, Case Study 5.3, Achieving a Culturally Sensitive Teaching Approach by Kristen Herring for EDLD 5413, Building Leadership Internship under Dr. Kimberly Wilkerson. Activity 1, Achieving Culturally Sensitive Teaching Approach, aligns with PSEL Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness. Effective educational leaders strive for equity of educational opportunity and culturally responsive practices to promote each student's academic success and well-being. Standard 3 sets the standard for cultural awareness and responsiveness. In it, it states educational leaders provide an unbiased environment where cultures are considered, students are treated with admiration, and policies for handling misbehavior are fair. Educational leaders will seek to find what makes each student unique and incorporate it in the learning process. They will establish a culture of success that provides all students a connection to successful teachers and educational experiences with needed support and resources. Educational leaders cultivate an atmosphere that is unbiased when establishing policies and handling behavior. They will confront biased practices of students and teachers and prepare teachers to be culturally relevant in the classroom. Educational leaders prepare students for adult living in a diverse world, and they take action while considering the cultural differences of all the stakeholders. NPBEA 2015. So to meet this standard, school administrators will need to create a plan for staying informed on the many cultures in the environment, increase student awareness of the diverse group of people around them every day. They will need to evaluate school culture and climate for equity and culture inclusion and take action when bias is found. They will need to evaluate educational access for all the students and act when students are not receiving access to the best teaching and learning environment. And finally, they will need to identify causes of inequitable behaviors and make changes. The process for completing the activity 1 that I took. I took a total of 20 hours to complete this activity, and I did so by meeting with Dr. John McCraney, the PCSSD Coordinator for Equity Initiatives, and with her we discussed AVID, which is a program that we have on our campuses, and the culturally relevant sources that are available through it. Our district uses this program because it is supposed to close the opportunity gap that is seen in students, and it provides strategies that are very good at closing the gap and providing teachers with resources to be culturally relevant in their teaching. We also discussed training opportunities that she provides to our school leaders and faculty. She's done all the training that she's going to do this year, but we did talk about the training and where she gets the materials that she uses for the training. I researched and read articles and studies that are out about the effects and needs of culturally relevant teaching. And then I found a great article that was on Asian culture and the educational practices and expectations in Asian countries, since the case study was related to American teachers going into an Asian culture to teach. I completed a mini literature review and about culturally responsive teaching. Then I analyzed the case study 5.3, Creating a Culturally Sensitive Teaching Approach. I examined the PSEL standards for alignment for Activity 1. I then met with Dr. Truslow, the principal of Oak Brook Elementary, and I just brought up Standard 3 and asked her how she aligns with this in her practice. And we discussed her thoughts on culturally responsive teaching and what her responsibilities are as educational leader. I then reflected on how I would apply my research and new knowledge as a building leader, and I wrote the paper and created the presentation and video. The knowledge gained through the completion of Activity 1 include learning to become culturally responsive teaching requires reflective practices. And this is something that even I recognize that I struggled with as a teacher. Many teachers are not comfortable reflecting because they have a fear that it will bring awareness or bias. It will make them feel aware of the biases and inequitable practices that they have had or have in the classroom. The teachers are aware of the lack of understanding of all cultures in the school community, which may lead to the thinking that differences are not important. Lack of classroom management can impact culturally relevant teaching. Teachers feel that they don't have enough time to study culturally relevant teaching strategies on their own. Including a variety of cultures in a classroom helps students become inclusive and improves student achievement. Culturally relevant teaching strategies increases student achievement and lessens the disparities between the different ethnic groups. So these are things that I learned through the research that I completed and the discussions that I had with Dr. McCraney and Dr. Treslow. So application of the knowledge. As an educational leader, I will continually evaluate the culture of the building for unequitable practices that need to be addressed. I will be responsible for providing professional development that is culturally relevant to the staff with understanding the many cultures that are on campus. I will be responsible for training the faculty and staff on being culturally sensitive and culturally relevant in teaching and interacting with the students. I will think through new processes, policies, and programs and actively train and get feedback before beginning to address the cultural sensitivities. As an educational leader, I will need to reflect periodically on my personal practices with all the stakeholders, and I will need to find programs like AVID that's mission is to close the opportunity gap in education. It will be important that I evaluate and complete classroom walkthroughs to ensure that students are being offered an inclusive and equitable education. I will be actively engaged in the master schedule to ensure that all students have the best learning opportunities. And I will make rational decisions as I go throughout the time that I am an educational leader. This is very important. This rational decision making is just very important because the level of turbulence can be increased so drastically if the building leader is not rational in their approach. So thinking ahead, trying to plan ahead, even though that's not always able to be done, is important. Upon reflecting, I found that ethical practices need to be discussed early and yearly. We need to do that early in the year and then throughout the year. Culturally responsive teaching strategies need to be practiced to build rapport with students. It's the building leader's responsibility to train and check in on faculty, staff, and students. Conflict resolution will be necessary when dealing with conflict among the stakeholders. Continual discerning of ethical paradigms will be needed. Lack of cultural responsive teaching can lead to an increase in the school turbulence. It is challenging to stay up to date on diversity in this ever-changing world. And professional learning communities are a good place for faculty and staff to read and discuss up-to-date information about culturally relevant teaching practices.